So Ukraine just shot down a Russian helicopter with a drone. I think it's pretty safe to say at this point that Russia is losing the Battle of the Black Sea to a country without a navy, which is wild. But anyways, yesterday, Ukraine announced that for the first time in history, a naval drone shot down a helicopter, and that's the footage that you're watching here. Now, that helicopter, and this is where it gets kind of spicy, was only out there over the Black Sea trying to hunt down and destroy these specific drones. So what we know right now is that this was a Ukrainian Magura V5 naval strike drone equipped with anti-aircraft missiles. So they show in this footage that a Russian Mi-8 helicopter was destroyed with an R-73 Sea Dragon missile, and Ukraine added, and this I think was confirmed by Russians as well, that a second Russian helicopter was also hit with one of these missiles and failed to return back to its home airfield. The reason I say maybe confirmed is we haven't really seen anything from official Russian media, but a lot of Russian mill bloggers, to include Fighter Bomber, kind of the number one Russian mill blogger tied in with the Russian Air Force, helicopters, things like that, put out a post just yesterday talking about the continued loss of high-quality crews and posted a picture of the helicopter, kind of suggesting more than one was just recently lost. Now, to put all of this into perspective, I think it's worth looking at what's actually playing out here. So if we go back to the very beginning of this war, when Ukraine was invaded by Russia in 2022, at that point, the Russian Navy, the Black Sea Fleet, essentially controlled the entirety of the Black Sea. Ukraine did have a navy, nothing compared. Certainly couldn't go toe-to-toe with Russia in any way, shape, or form. So to try to contest that portion of the battlefield, Ukraine started developing drones or unmanned surface vessels. They're kind of like torpedoes, fancy torpedoes, if you will. It's probably the best way to describe these. And the early ones were just outfitted with explosive charges. They were kamikazes. Again, torpedoes. They're designed to be driven into the side of a Russian ship where they detonate and at the very least cause a lot of damage, maybe even sink the ship. So eventually, Russia figured that out and decided that to protect their fleet after losing quite a few ships, all things considered, they moved them back into port and kind of ceded the Black Sea to these drones. Ukraine continued to try to attack these ships and was pretty successful even when the Russian ships were in port. So Russia put helicopters out over the Black Sea to identify and shoot these and destroy these drones before they made it to their target. So Ukraine came up with a little innovation themselves. They started putting machine guns on some of these drones to shoot back at the Russian helicopters. Others were outfitted with MLRS or multiple launch rocket system pods, like from the Grad BM-21, mounted on one of these surface vessels that could fire at really anything, pretty inaccurate. And then, of course, most recently, we're starting to see surface-to-air missiles. So those helicopters that are sent out over the Black Sea to try to hunt these drones have all of a sudden become the hunted. Again, pretty safe to say at this point that the country without a navy is actually winning the Battle of the Black Sea. Bit of a different story when we shift down to Yemen, where it's kind of the exact opposite, where arguably the world's largest, strongest, most capable navy, that is the United States Navy, continues to have a pretty hard time with this little group that occupies the western portion of Yemen, also known as the Houthis. Now, the Houthis, not a great group by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, right there on their flag that they wave proudly every chance they get, it says, "God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, curse be upon the Jews, victory to Islam." Again, that's their flag. That's like the public-facing portion of this organization, and they just came under attack again from Israel and the United States. Couldn't happen to a nicer group. I know. So on December 26th, Israel released a statement saying a short while ago, Israeli fighter jets conducted intelligence-based strikes on military targets belonging to the Houthis on the western coast and inland Yemen. They say the targets that were struck include military infrastructure used by the Houthis for its military activities in both the Sana'a International Airport and 2 power stations. They say these military targets were used by the Houthi terrorist regime to smuggle Iranian weapons into the region and for the entry of senior Iranian officials. This is further example of the Houthis' exploitation of civilian infrastructure for military purposes. Look, to be blunt, it hasn't done anything. There's been a series of strikes by the U.S. and Israel over the last few months, and we really haven't seen any change at all from the Houthis. In fact, this wave of Israeli strikes led to a Houthi statement essentially doubling down. They said, quote, "This aggression will only increase the determination and the resolve of the great Yemeni people to continue supporting the Palestinian people, and their operations will not stop until the aggression on Gaza stops and the siege is lifted." Now, a quick note there, something to kind of prep yourself for as we, continue to move forward here. So long as the Houthis continue to exist, whenever the war in Gaza comes to a close, no matter how it comes to a close, the Houthis will claim responsibility. They'll claim victory over the United States and Israel. I don't know how much that matters. I mean, I've got a story here in a second where apparently Hamas has won every battle in the Gaza Strip since October 2023. That's clearly not the case, but it's messaging, and I'm not entirely sure how much that actually matters when it clearly contradicts with events on the ground. But prepare yourself. The Houthis are really setting the stage to claim victory whenever any sort of end to the war in Gaza is reached, and that's going to resonate with an audience in the Middle East that is just looking for any reason to believe in any failure of the United States, Israel, and other countries from the West. Now, just yesterday and the day prior, U.S. Central Command got in on the strikes on the Houthis, saying on December 30th and 31st, U.S. Navy ships and aircraft targeted a Houthi command and control facility and advanced conventional weapons and storage facilities that included missiles and uncrewed aerial vehicles. This was about a week or closer to 10 days after the last wave of U.S. strikes on December 21st. And what comes to mind in all of this is what I think should probably be like some of the key moments from the Biden administration when they asked him, President Biden, about these strikes. And he said, quote, "Are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes." End quote. And honestly, that's kind of the story with the Houthis so far. Nothing the United States or Israel have done, or the UK when they were taking part in the strikes as well, has done anything to really stop the Houthis from continuing to attack commercial shipping throughout the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. They're continuing to conduct attacks trying to hit U.S. military vessels in the Red Sea. And almost every other day now, they're launching long-range missiles or drones into Israeli territory. They haven't stopped, at all. It's embarrassing, to be honest, is the best way to put this. And just earlier today, news came out, and we've got the footage here. The Houthis say they shot down the 13th U.S. Reaper drone. That's the big fixed-wing, $30 million drone, actually, that the U.S. operates. It can fire Hellfire missiles or drop laser-guided bombs. 13 of those shot down by the Houthis. Now, that goes back to 2017, but 11 of those 13 are since November 2023. So I think it's pretty safe to say that the Houthis' air defense capabilities have advanced a little bit. Not nearly enough to shoot down actual manned aircraft that are conducting a lot of these strikes, but 11 drones in a year and a half, that's pretty serious. And again, kind of embarrassing, which is why I said it in a recent video, and I'll say it again. I think that the Houthis are probably at the top of the target list for the incoming Trump administration. It's just a quick and easy way. It's an easy target and a way to show the entire world, things have changed. We're not going to be putting up with this nonsense anymore, this rebel group in the western portion of Yemen shutting down essentially major shipping operations throughout the world. All right, so I teased this one a second ago, but let's go ahead and jump in here. I'm going to pull up a Wikipedia page titled List of Military Engagements During the Israel-Hamas War. And look, Wikipedia can be a great place to start your research. Problems arise when it shows something like this. Israel has not won a single battle against Hamas in Gaza since they invaded in October 2023. That might be, just a little misleading for how the conflict is actually playing out day to day, which is tough, right? Again, Wikipedia, great place to start the research, but if somebody were to send this over as a link, say they, hey, I want to know what's going on with Gaza right now. How's that playing out? And somebody sends you this link to Wikipedia, right? And you say, man, it looks like Israel's kind of getting their teeth kicked in left and right. That's the only way to read this. Now, the way that, and I should note that actually going to this page now, you can't find this because shortly after this recording, and I put it up on X and TikTok and some other platforms, and there were much larger accounts than mine that put it out. So this wasn't my doing, but eventually the Wikipedia editors went in and removed that results column. They said no more, which is probably how it should have been in the first place. But nonetheless, managed to get a screen recording before that change. And that's what I'm showing here, where they had the list of military engagements broken out as 18 major battles in Gaza. So this is after the October 7th attacks, once Israeli forces moved into the Gaza Strip. Of those 18, they broke them down into 5 ongoing, which honestly, at this point in the war, they probably should have listed all as ongoing if they were going to put any result by them, but they didn't stop there. They put 5 as Israeli withdrawal, which, there's parts of the Gaza Strip Israeli forces went into and moved out of. But from a military perspective, anytime you list a military as having withdrawn from the battlefield, it kind of paints that as a defeat, by other words, right? So it doesn't say Israeli defeat or Israeli loss. It says Israeli withdrawal, but in the military context, that's generally how it's viewed. And then 8, they just straight up listed as a Hamas or Palestinian victory. So of those 18, 8 are Hamas or Palestinian victories, 5 are Israeli withdrawals, and then 5 are ongoing. So again, if somebody were to all of a sudden try to catch up with the war and they come across this page on Wikipedia, the only logical takeaway is that Hamas is overwhelmingly winning this war. And look, it's tough in an unconventional type insurgency fight like this to really put start and end date on operations and say who the clear victor is from day in and day out. You got to take the long-term perspective, but even then, I mean, there's definitely valid arguments to say that Israel has not accomplished all of their objectives in Gaza. I mean, there are still something like 100 hostages being held by Hamas. But to look at individual battles and say that Israel has lost every major battle they've taken part in the Gaza Strip might be a little bit misleading. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about a second ago. How much does this actually matter, right? If the information space is painting a drastically different picture than reality, so what? In a way, right? Like this Wikipedia article did not change the reality on the ground in Gaza. It might have listed some of these as Hamas victories. They weren't. So like, what does it really do? I mean, at the very least, it probably makes it convoluted when you're trying to have a conversation about this conflict or trying to inform people about how this is playing out. Because no matter who you're rooting for, what side you want to see come out on top, it doesn't really help to have a distorted picture of the reality on the ground. So either way, glad to see Wikipedia made that little change, but you know, it's a finicky platform, right? When editors can go in there and adjust things as they see fit. But at least those edits can be made. If we shift down to Syria, wait till you hear this story. So William Christow, writing for The Guardian, put together an article recently talking about censorship in Sana. That's the Syrian state media under the former head of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, where he wrote, quote, "Journalists were obliged to change copy from Russia's Sputnik news agency to make it stricter. For example, Russian media's mention of Ukraine's army would be changed to neo-Nazi forces in Sana's stories. Quote, we would joke that we were the real Moscow, not them," one of the reporters said, adding that in recent years, journalists on the foreign desk could only write about Cuba, Iran, Russia, and Venezuela. Talk about a narrow worldview. Those are the only countries that you know to exist in terms of where news is coming from, not painting a great picture of how humanity is progressing in the year 2024. Now 2025. Happy New Year, by the way. I always kind of wonder about this because, remember, this isn't North Korea where like generation after generation came up in an entirely closed society. There's a lot of people in Syria that are, you know, very well aware that Russia, Cuba, Iran, and Venezuela are not the only other countries that exist. So how is that portrayed? And how long does it take for somebody just to say, you know what, enough's enough, I'm just going to buy into it, rather than being skeptical about the news that Sana is kind of pushing down our throat? I'm just going to, it is what it is. This is now the news that I know. I don't know. It's kind of dark when you think about it. Now, they mentioned that as journalists researched their stories, they were asked to collect any negative articles about the Assad regime that appeared in the foreign press. They would copy and paste these stories into an email, sign their names, and send it off to a special account given to them by the palace. Where these emails went, journalists had no idea. They never received a reply. In my mind, there are people actually employed by Bashar al-Assad, or held there, more on that here in a second, to just look through Western or global media outlets and like, who's talking shit about Assad, right? And I wonder, why are they even doing that? Like, what do they do with that information, right? This is Syria, and they're looking at foreign news outlets. So like, are they going to clamp down on CNN, right? They're already letting in very few international media sources. So like, I don't know exactly what the end goal is there, other than Assad wanting to stay up on all of the bad stuff that the world is saying about him. That had to be draining, right? Now, in the same article, they say that journalists were not allowed to quit. They could present their resignation to a special committee, which would invariably deny the request. That sucks. Think about that. Working at a job where they talk about these guys, where there's reporters actually in there doing reporting work, which for the most part by 2024 was just repeating whatever the Assad regime told them to put out. They even talk about how like they would find corrections to be made and they were scared to make the corrections because like, you know what, just not going to mess with that. But they had moles inside of their newspaper, reporters whose only job was to report on other reporters. So you can see how people might not want to work there, but they didn't have much of a choice. They go to quit and their boss says no. In fact, there was one story in this same article, one of the guys they interviewed saying that, I think it was back in 2014, he was sitting at lunch one day. This is just how crazy it was in Syria. He was sitting at lunch one day, and all of a sudden he realized that the other three guys he was sitting with were all from the same sectarian background, and they went, uh-oh. And they split up immediately because I guess, a handful of Alawites sitting together or something, right, could be viewed, or Christians sitting together, could be viewed as like they're scheming. They're coming up with something to try to topple Assad or whatever it might be. And they were right. Like the next day they got a letter saying, we saw that. Don't do that again. Be careful. That's kind of crazy. You can imagine why somebody might actually want to quit that job. But good news, it looks like Syria's kind of past that. We've got videos just in the last 24 hours. They were celebrating, or Christians in Syria were celebrating Christmas, and we've got Syrians, celebrating the New Year with light shows and raves. Not exactly my cup of tea, but I kind of love that, actually, right? Good for the Syrian people. I genuinely hope from the bottom of my heart that they're able to find peace and security for them and their families going forward. Now, this last piece here is one of those articles, one of those stories where you can't entirely tell if it's from The Onion or not. You got to do a little bit of digging and you find out, no, that's actually real. So we've got a U.S. military contractor who pled guilty on December 30th, just a couple days ago, to lying on his national security clearance forms about his relationships with ISIS. The problem was the lying, probably, right? Not the underlying relationship. But anyways, it says authorities say that he secretly sent money to ISIS-K, so Islamic State Khorasan Province, that's the group in Afghanistan. While he was deployed to Afghanistan for the U.S. military, he attempted to get an arrested ISIS-K member freed. That's an interesting one to bat around here, and we'll get to that in a second. They say, according to a plea document outlining the case, Rafi's publicly available Facebook account revealed a pattern of reposting videos featuring both arrested ISIS-K recruiters and other publicly identified members or recruiters for ISIS-K. In April 2018 and in May 2018, via direct messages on Rafi's Facebook account, he sought telephone numbers for ISIS-K recruiters. During that same period, Rafi used direct messages on his Facebook account to directly send money via Western Union from Kansas to Afghanistan to be delivered to one of the subsequently arrested ISIS-K recruiters. There's a lot there, right? My big takeaway is like Facebook sucks. Don't want to mess with that at all. I feel very confident in my decision to really not be on that platform at all. Also, Western Union, the only time I've ever had anybody ask me to use Western Union to send them money, it ended up being, and it's a really sad story, but it ended up being that it was to feed a heroin addiction. So, we've got PayPal, Venmo. I mean, I guess I don't know what exactly works in Afghanistan these days. Wise, crypto. I feel ACH, can't do that, or wire transfers. I just feel like there's a lot of other options available around the world. Western Union seems suspect at best. Now, they say, according to filings, Rafi was deployed to Afghanistan as a military contract linguist in October 2019. Shortly after that, authorities say that U.S. soldiers found him one day in November trying to sneak back onto base. Rafi allegedly told an informant later that he had secretly left the military compound in an attempt to facilitate the release of an ISIS-K recruiter who had been arrested by the Afghan government. It's according to the court records. I just, when we look at this now, it's like, what an idiot, right? What is he just going to walk up to the Afghans guarding there's serious enemies, murderers of ISIS-K, and say, that guy, that was a mistake. He's a friend of mine, or I'm here on official. What's the plan to get this ISIS-K operative out of prison? They don't get into those details. Unfortunately, it is the kind of thing where you can kind of look back and say, I feel like if that story had actually played out, we wouldn't be that shocked, right? To find out that in any country, somebody just walks up to the prison, says, actually, I'm here to take X, Y, and Z home. He's okay. And he just makes his way out of prison. So fortunately, it didn't work here. The Afghans held their post, but not a good look for old Rafi here. They say in an interview with the FBI, Rafi told investigators that he had made a series of Facebook posts supporting ISIS-K, quote, to become famous by posting their content, as he believed following bad people would bring him fame. He was his defense is that he was trying to troll, I guess, right? I just follow the accounts for the shock value, right? Try to rile up people on the internet that would make me more famous is kind of his Now, in Rafi's defense of his defense, I don't know that the ISIS supporting posts are going to be the thing that kind of undoes them. The whole sending money to ISIS-K and then trying to foster, maintain relationships, and then release ISIS members from prison. Probably going to play a little more into the sentencing whenever that comes out. But that's a true story. It actually first came out back in 2022, and just now, actually, the court documents are being made public. But that's super, start to finish. But that's all I got for now. First video of 2025. So hope you all have a wonderful new year. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.